Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. We are so grateful to have the Tummy Temple team with us, and we have Dr. Jennea Wood, naturopathic doctor at Tummy Temple of Olympia and Lacey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm Dr. Jennea Wood. I practice primarily at the Lacey location of Tummy Temple, and this is a topic near and dear to my heart, so I'm glad to have you all with me today. Please feel free, as Elizabeth said, to stop and ask questions along the way. Either type them in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask. Heidi will be sharing some links as we move along, and as I mention, specific strategies and products and things like that. So you can check there for those things. And let's dive in. So I want to start with the most important takeaways. Our bodies are really built to detoxify. They do this naturally, and they have many routes of getting toxins out, and we can help the process along. I want to inspire you to look at cleansing as something that you can do for yourself out of self-love and self-care, and just to help yourself feel better and more comfortable in your body. Really, the absolute most foundational piece here is to reduce exposure to toxins, because unfortunately we live in a world where we get exposed to a lot of chemicals, and it doesn't help to get panicked and clenched up about it. And there's no perfection. It's not possible to avoid every little thing. But there are some really basic things that we can do to reduce our exposures and therefore step out of a constant cycle of detoxing and retoxing. So we'll go over those things today, or some of those things. And also I will share, I'll send an email after the class today, actually probably tomorrow once I get the email addresses. And that will include a handout on the top 5 things that you can do to just reduce exposure in your life. Just to name a few: eating organic, removing shoes in your home, taking your shoes off at the door in your home, switching to a stainless steel or glass water bottle as opposed to plastic water bottles. And there'll be some other things on there, but I find that that's a really, really useful way to just take out some of the biggest exposure sources. And then we can incorporate small acts of cleansing into daily life that will help enormously with long-term health. And then finally, I think it is really valuable to choose some type of cleansing approach. There are a lot of types out there. So choosing one that works for you, feels good to your body, and doing a more concentrated cleanse 1 to 4 times a year. So seasonally can be wonderful. And then, that's more than some people can take on. So once a year is a great place to start. And to look at that as just a self-care practice that you incorporate into your life. And that will have a positive impact on most every type of chronic disease, to help our bodies detoxify in that way. So why cleanse? I think probably if you're at this class, you're aware that we're being exposed to toxins every day, and our bodies just make metabolic waste products in the normal course of living that we need to get rid of. But if it were just the metabolic waste products, we would keep up with it just fine. It's really the addition of all of the other exposures that kind of overflows the capacity of our bodies to keep up with it. can think of it sort of like a funnel. And, the outlet of the funnel is only so big. And so the funnel will drain at the rate that it drains. But at a certain point, if there's too much going into it, it's going to overflow. And so that overflow is when we start to get sick from environmental toxicity. And we can widen the exit of the funnel by supporting our organs of elimination. So sources of toxicity, to name a few, we talked about normal metabolism. And that's, I don't know if that's even fair, metabolic waste products, we need to get rid of them at a certain point. If they build up to a certain point, they have a toxic effect as well. But generally it's, they're pretty benign. Unfiltered drinking water and bathing water, but especially drinking. Cleaning supplies, skin care, makeup, body care, air pollution, candles and air fresheners, mold, food and water storage containers. And then in our foods, we can be exposed to pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides, as well as food additives that are chemicals. And then actually just not digesting your food well results in an accumulation of toxic matter that can make us sick. And then lifestyle. So things like lack of movement and exercise affects the movement of our lymph, and holding our breath with anxiety or stress causes a buildup of carbon dioxide, and not expressing our feelings. We can have a buildup of toxic emotions. So there was a study done looking at the cord blood, so the blood in the umbilical cord of babies, and this was done in 2004. Unfortunately, it's probably gotten worse now, but it showed that babies born in August and September of 2004 had an average of 200 industrial chemicals and pollutants isolated in the blood, in the cord blood. And actually, there was just a very recent study that came out showing that basically every human on this planet has microplastics in our body, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, I read it was something like you ate a credit card's worth of plastic every month. It was something insane.
That's just so awful.
Yeah.
So this is scary and can be upsetting, but my goal is to bring awareness, not panic. The goal is just to be mindful of reducing exposures where we can, but not to get paranoid about, trying to avoid every single thing, because it's just not possible. There's a certain amount of, we can cope with a certain amount of exposures. We just really will benefit from reducing them and then helping our bodies cope. So this is where cleansing comes in. Basically, everyone would benefit from cleansing, with the exception of babies and very young children and pregnant mothers. During pregnancy is not a time you want to be stirring up toxins, because some of these cleansing approaches will actually help your body start to move stored toxins out of the tissues. And we don't want to be doing that during a pregnancy. In older children, some of the gentler approaches can absolutely be adapted and used with children. And some of the specific signs and symptoms that can point to a need for cleansing are a lot of skin eruptions like acne and eczema and psoriasis, allergies. So if you're having terrible allergies right now, helping the liver, helping the lymphatic system can really, really calm those down. And then doing some cleansing work over time can make it so that approaching allergy season will not be not be so severe in future years. Can also help with asthma. Diabetes actually has a huge component, especially type 2 diabetes has a huge component of environmental toxicity, and you can regain a lot of insulin sensitivity, meaning your body starts to respond more normally and not spike blood sugar as high, and it can really play a huge role in improving diabetes, to do cleansing work and reduce exposure to environmental chemicals. Headaches and migraines can absolutely have a component of toxicity. Any autoimmune disease, digestive disturbance, and varicose veins, as well as hemorrhoids, because there are other reasons you can develop varicose veins and hemorrhoids, but one of the reasons can be back pressure from the liver on those veins in the lower body. Any questions so far? Okay. All right, so I want to go a little bit deeper on the organs of elimination. And it's an important concept to understand because this is where people can really differ in which body systems need the most support. So as we're going through these, I would invite you to just kind of listen and make note of whether one or more of these particularly rings a bell for you as an area that could use additional support. And then we'll talk about what types of therapies and strategies can help that system particularly. And so that's a good way to kind of target what systems, like what types of approaches might be best for you. So the primary organs of elimination that really, when everything's humming along well, this is the main way that our bodies get toxins out, include the skin via sweat, the lungs via breathing, the kidneys via urination, and the intestines via stool, as well as the emotions. And then we have the secondary routes of elimination. So if the primary routes are compromised, for example, being constipated or rarely moving the body, rarely sweating, holding our breath, that sort of thing, or breathing very shallowly, then the body will begin to build up toxins, but also still be trying to make up for the lack in those primary routes by relying on secondary routes of elimination. And so that often manifests as skin breakouts. So we'll start to literally exude stuff from our pores and be more prone to breakouts and rashes, as well as the mucous membranes of every system. So the urogenital system, the respiratory system, and the gastrointestinal system. So we'll just start putting out more mucus. And so things you might notice would be mucus in your stool, excess mucus produced in the lungs, throat, nose, or sinuses, urinary tract infections, or not like once in years and years, but a propensity toward urinary tract infections or vaginal infections, acne, eczema, and other types of skin rashes. So an example of, in conventional medicine, a well-intentioned but somewhat counterproductive treatment that really shuts down the secondary emunctory rather than just helping the body detoxify better is using steroid cream for eczema. So, in a pinch, terrible flare of eczema, it's not the end of the world to you're on a trip, you're itching terribly, there's nothing that can be done. It's not the end of the world to use a little bit of steroid cream here or there, but using that as the only strategy to treat eczema is ignoring this underlying, or just, being unaware of this underlying issue, which is this kind of buildup of toxicity in the body. And the body, in its wisdom, is trying to then get toxins out any way that it can. It's not very comfortable, of course, but still, it's a move by the body that's attempting to right the imbalance. And so ultimately, if that was all you did, the slow accumulation of toxicity would continue. You would shut down this sort of secondary attempt at clearing it out, and then, miss an opportunity to help the body to eliminate better. And as that accumulation of toxins continues, if they're not getting out any other way, they will start to be deposited in the muscles, in the joints, in the heart, in the lungs, in the brain, and that over years can lead to more serious disease. So the digestive system, just to review how it normally works. So we're taking in food, water, drinks, medicines, alcohol, breaking these things down to their component parts and absorbing them into the bloodstream. And those nutrients, along with the alcohol and any medications or chemicals, are getting sent via the blood to the liver for processing and detoxification. Whatever's left in the digestive tract gets broken down further. So that's mainly fiber, gets broken down further by bacteria and eventually eliminated. And then some of the toxins, especially the fat-soluble toxins that are being processed by the liver, get added to the bile, stored in the gallbladder, and then, put out into the intestines and ideally eliminated through the stool. But we actually reabsorb a lot of it and just reuse it over and over again for digestion. And so we're not very good at getting it out, actually. So things that clog the digestive system are not being hydrated, not enough dietary fiber, eating lots of processed foods and food additives, not moving the body enough. So our metabolism and our digestion slows down when we are sedentary. And stretching, yoga, things like that actually sort of stretch and compress the belly are really, really helpful for keeping things moving. And then dysbiosis, so that's a medical term for an imbalance in the types of gut bacteria, fungus, or parasites in the intestine. So that's another cause of some issues that can sort of clog up the digestive system. SIBO, which stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So that's an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine, which is high up the digestive tube. And those bacteria are really only meant to be found in large numbers in the last 5 feet, which is the large intestine or colon. And it causes all sorts of issues when they're in the wrong place. And then low stomach acid, not making enough digestive enzymes, and then not enough bile. Those things can all clog things up, slow things down. And then certain foods, dairy is very clogging and slowing to the digestive system. Meat, when it's not balanced out by enough fiber. Bananas and rice tend to be somewhat constipating. So signs of congestion in the digestive tract, pretty obvious, really. Constipation is the biggest one, but then gas, bloating, burping, and heartburn can also be signs. And a lot of people, Heidi and I have developed a class on constipation because there's so much to talk about there, and there's so much that can be done to help, and there's a lot of misunderstanding. And so keep an eye out for that. I believe we'll be teaching that one together in the fall. Yeah, a lot of people think, if you poop 3 times a week, that's fine. or that's enough, or even once a day is sometimes not enough from the especially from the perspective of detoxification. A couple times a day is really, like 2 to 3 times a day is ideal from this perspective. And then how to keep the colon detoxifying. We covered some of this already. Drinking plenty of water, getting regular exercise, and then eating plenty of fiber, mostly in whole food forms, so not just fiber supplements. Our ancestors who were hunter-gatherers and lived a traditional lifestyle, we have evidence that they ate over 100 grams of fiber a day. And most Americans get an average of 12 to 18 grams per day. The Institute of Medicine recommends about 25 grams a day for women and 33 grams a day for men. And that's still probably not enough. I would say like bare minimum for everyone would be, or for adults anyway, would be about 30 grams a day, but ideally 40 or 50. It makes a huge, huge difference. In part because it holds on to the bile longer. So we're more likely to get the bile with its load of toxins out on a regular basis. But it also bulks the stools and makes it more likely that we'll just go to the bathroom more regularly. And then if you have digestive symptoms, there can be a lot of underlying causes. And so it's really worth getting help discovering the root causes, which can be food intolerances, can be dysbiosis, like we talked about, low stomach acid, SIBO, etc. And that takes a bit more customized investigation and treatment. So it's definitely worth getting help with that. I would say that colonics are unparalleled in helping to decongest the colon and helping with detoxification because they're so good at flushing out bile. And so, yeah, that's one of the absolute like go-to things. They can be so helpful for acne, period pain, allergies, all sorts of things, just from that perspective of detoxification. And then other things that can be very helpful are just finding, yes, of course, we want to figure out like what's the root cause of each person's digestive issues and address the root cause. In the meantime, it can be really, really useful to use a safe, reliable stool softener. And the ones we usually go to are Temple Calm, which is a powdered magnesium citrate. It's very safe. The only thing that will happen if you take too much magnesium citrate is you will overshoot softening the stool and have diarrhea, and then you just reduce the dose. So that can be a very simple and helpful strategy. And then Daiju is our herbal stool softener formula, and that works very, very well for almost everyone to just keep the intestines moving and keep the bowels moving. And then a good probiotic, and the one that we tend to go for is called Temple Biotic, can be helpful for balancing the ecology in the gut.
Dr. Wood, there is a question about how someone might do cleansing for the spleen. And also I'm putting links in the chat for any of the products that Dr. Wood is mentioning. And she'll also send a link to the whole collection in her email.
The top thing that I would use for the spleen, well, top things would be staying hydrated, castor oil. You can do topical castor oil, and I would just do it over the whole belly, but over, over the liver, over the abdomen. And then the spleen is kind of tucked more toward the back on the left side of the body. But castor oil over that area would be really helpful. It sinks in and it actually helps to stimulate motility and activity of the white blood cells. So castor oil packs would be great. And I believe we have a link or we have a YouTube video that Heidi can probably share in the link on how to do castor oil. Thank you. And then our electrolymphatic therapy would be really, really helpful as well. And we'll talk about that a bit more, and we'll talk about the lymphatic system in general a bit more in a moment. So next up is the liver. It works by, well, it does, 1,000 tasks, quite literally. It does many, many things, but on a detoxification front, it filters toxins out of the blood and performs a series of chemical reactions called phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification to help step by step make those toxins more water soluble so that they can then be put into the urine for elimination or through the kidneys and eliminated by the urine, or put into the bile to be eliminated through the digestive system. It also stores vitamin D and vitamin B12. It produces cholesterol, other things that the liver does. It regulates blood sugar and stores up some sugars to keep our blood sugar stable between meals. So it has a lot of tasks. But yeah, that phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification is crucial. It is clogged by alcohol use, air pollution, water pollution, pharmaceuticals, food additives, excess sugar and junk food, smoking, and then sleep and daily, sticking to a steady daily rhythm for our sleep and our meals actually has an important effect on the liver. In Chinese medicine, it's been known for thousands of years that the most active time of the liver is during the night. And for this reason, it really is important to sleep during the night. And ideally, go to bed by 10 or 11 p.m. and get at least 8 hours of sleep per night is really, really helpful for liver function. In Chinese medicine, I believe it's 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. is considered liver time. And I actually very often have people tell me that they wake up during those hours when it seems like they're having some issues with liver congestion and also with blood sugar balance. Oftentimes it's like a drop in blood sugar that wakes people up, and that's a function of the liver. That's one of the things that it does. And so if it's not working quite properly, sometimes it's not managing our steady blood sugar while we sleep. And so that drops and we wake up with a burst of cortisol because cortisol helps bring our blood sugar back up. But it's also a stress hormone and doesn't feel that great. So disrupting our circadian rhythm can have significant effects on the liver. A study in mice showed that the liver grows in size by 40% during waking and feeding hours, and then shrinks back down to baseline during sleep when on a 24-hour cycle. And that pattern just doesn't happen anymore if the sleeping and feeding times don't follow a regular, steady daily pattern. So there have only been small studies on humans to this point, but they have showed a similar pattern. And this really matches up with our understanding of that the liver operates best on a steady cycle of regular sleep times, regular wake time, regular meal times. Our bodies really, really like consistent patterns of activity. And they're built to follow patterns of daylight and nighttime. And those cycles get set by daylight going in through our eyeballs and then darkness at night. So international travel, shift work, irregular meal times, and disrupted sleep all interfere with this and interfere with the liver. So ways to keep the liver functioning well. An enormous one is reducing exposure to chemicals, minimizing alcohol intake, and actually minimizing Tylenol use as well. Tylenol is very hard on the liver. Keeping the diet healthy and as much as possible free of food additives, free of pesticides, herbicides. So, mostly organic, or especially if you can't afford all organic foods, looking up the environmental working groups, Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 lists. And the Dirty Dozen are each year, this nonprofit organization tests all different types of conventional produce and rates the 12 that are the highest in contamination of pesticides and herbicides, and which ones are the lowest. And so it's a good way to gauge like what's worth spending the additional money on. There's more details on that on the handout that I'll send out after the class. And then getting 7 or 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep per night. If you struggle with this, getting help with that, that's something that myself or our naturopathic doctors can help with. And then castor oil packs are very, very helpful. And again, you can refer to the YouTube video for that. And then coffee enemas are incredibly helpful for the liver. They significantly increase glutathione production in the liver, and glutathione is our most powerful antioxidant, and it's also one of the main factors that our liver binds to toxins to make them water soluble and help get rid of them. And coffee enemas can be done at home, or they can be an add-on to a colonic session. And we also have a YouTube video with guidance on how to do coffee enemas at home. And then colonics really help to sweep out bile, which carries toxins out of the body. And so that they're not just for constipation or for the digestive system, they also really, really help the liver. And then there are a lot of herbs that are very helpful for the liver. And so using some liver herbs periodically, or, there are some just like gentle herbs like milk thistle, dandelion root, yellow dock root, things like that, burdock, which you can often find in a health food store. Those are things that you can just incorporate into your diet. Milk thistle seed, you can just grind it up and sprinkle it on your food. So, there are things like that that can be safely used all year if you want to. But then, those can also be used in a more concentrated way a couple times a year for like a spring cleanse or a fall cleanse or something like that. Some other foods that are very good for the liver are any naturally occurring food that has sulfur in it. So that includes onions, garlic, mushrooms, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, radishes, and then lemon juice, especially where you're getting a little bit of the fresh lemon essential oil, has a very beneficial effect on phase 2 liver detoxification. And then just a gentle liver support formula that we use is called HEPA caps, and that'll be in the link of product recommendations. And then things that can aid in deeper cleansing. There are a lot of different strategies. The one that we tend to rely on is what we've kind of built into our Revive Cleanse program, and that's offered on an ongoing basis. It can just be purchased, and it's like self-guided, going through these really helpful videos that coach you through the entire process. And then it comes with some products, including a really good quality probiotic, the Temple Biotic that I mentioned earlier, and then our complete body reset packs, which are little packets of supplements to be taken 3 times a day for 10 days. Of course, you can take one a day for 30 days if you want to, but it's kind of designed to be a 10-day cleanse. And so that I have just found to be a very therapeutic, beneficial cleansing program. So that's what I most often recommend. There are so many other strategies out there. I think juice fasting can be really valuable and beneficial, although I would just caution you to absolutely only use organic juices, because it's so concentrated that when you're removing all the fiber, that you're getting completely much more exposed to any pesticides and herbicides that are in there. And so it's just not a good idea to do a juice cleanse with conventionally grown produce or fruits. But that a short juice cleanse is one of the strategies that I most often use for severe eczema. And I've seen that really, really help with severe eczema. So anyway, there are a lot of strategies out there, but those are the two that I kind of direct people to most often because I've just seen them really, really help. All right, the next organ of elimination is the kidneys. They are constantly filtering our blood. They filter our entire blood volume multiple times a day in order to maintain precise electrolyte levels, maintain our blood pressure, and get rid of toxins through the urine. They also help maintain precise acidity of the blood by holding on to or getting rid of hydrogen ions, which is what makes things acidic through the urine. And they get clogged by being dehydrated is one of the very biggest ones, as is air pollution, water pollution, pharmaceutical medications. There are, like when you look up a medication, at least in medical resources, medical databases, it will tell you whether it's excreted through the kidneys or the liver, and it's always one or the other. And so it's specific pharmaceuticals that go through the kidneys, other ones through the liver. Food additives, smoking has a really high impact on the kidneys. And, people always think of lung cancer with smoking, but actually kidney cancer is very common, or bladder cancer is very common. And then it's actually hard on the kidneys when we hold our urine for too long. So just not listening to your body when you have to pee, or jobs that make it impossible to find time to go to the bathroom when you need to, can be hard on the kidneys over time. So we can help our kidneys do their job better by staying hydrated, making sure we're getting trace minerals and electrolytes like potassium, chloride, and magnesium. Urinating when we feel the urge as soon as possible. And then reducing exposure to all of the things we've been talking about, not smoking cigarettes, using a water filter and an air filter. So next up is the lungs. So they take in oxygen, eliminate carbon dioxide. Interestingly, when you lose weight in the form of fat, the majority of the mass of that fat is actually converted via chemical reactions to carbon dioxide, and we breathe it out. The lungs also work with the kidneys to maintain that precise acidity of the blood by modulating how much CO2 or carbon dioxide we breathe out. And they can be clogged through shallow breathing, air pollution, mold exposure, which, in some ways is a type of air pollution, smoking, of course, and exposure to wildfire smoke, eating foods that increase mucus production. And this can really vary from person to person, but dairy is a common one. Cane sugar is a common one. Actually, orange juice can cause a lot of mucus production in some people. And then, of course, there are specific lung disorders like cystic fibrosis that are genetically based that really, really clog up the lungs. So we can keep them detoxifying by breathing, of course, it's very obvious, but on a subconscious level with stress, a lot of times people, myself included, can start to breathe very shallowly or find ourselves kind of holding our breath for short periods of time. And so that can be sort of clogging to the lungs. So we can really help by having a daily meditation practice that focuses on steady, slow abdominal breathing. And that really helps shift us back into a rest and digest state, and then also helps those lungs function well. So the skin modulates our temperature of the body by controlling how much blood flows through the vessels right under the skin versus the deep vessels, and then also via sweating. So it controls moisture loss as well. And the skin gets clogged from not sweating enough, not getting enough exercise. Chemicals in body care products is a huge one, and especially petroleum-based body care products like Vaseline, and then antiperspirant deodorants. And so we can keep the skin optimally detoxifying by using saunas and sweating, and especially sweating where we're relaxed. So saunas work better for detoxification than sweating from exercise. Sweating from exercise is great. It's still helpful in many, many ways, but our bodies redirect more resources toward detoxification when we're in a relaxed state. And, our bodies prioritize things differently when we're running versus when we're sweating in a sauna. And then, switching to a natural deodorant that doesn't clog the pores, switching to body care, skincare, cleaning products, anything that goes on our skin, to things that are safe, not petroleum based, and just use natural things that you would be willing to eat. And a lot of the products out there, that would not be the case. Another thing that's on the handout that I'll be sending out is a link to Skin Deep database, which is another project by the Environmental Working Group. And they have this massive database where you can search, most body care, skincare products, and they will go line by line, ingredient by ingredient, and rate each ingredient as far as safety, and then give an overall rating for the product. And they'll explain why they gave it a certain rating. And they'll explain, is this rated as toxic or, more of a health concern because it causes allergies, because it causes cancer, because, et cetera, because it interferes with hormone balance. Those are some of the top things of certain ingredients that are unfortunately found in a lot of skincare products and cleaning products. So that's a great resource. I recommend that people, step by step, go through and search the products that they use there. And you can also use that resource to find safer ones if you find that what you're using is more on the toxic end of things. All right, getting closer to the end of the organs of elimination. So the lymph is a body system that we focus great attention on at Tummy Temple, but it's often underappreciated elsewhere. And so we try to spread the word of how important it is. It's a complex network of vessels that act as an immune superhighway for our white blood cells. And so it basically is our immune system. It's our circulatory system for the immune system. And then it's also sort of like a complex body-wide waste transport system. So of course we think of waste going through the digestive tract, but this is like everywhere else, like the garbage collection system for the spaces around the cells and around the joints and the muscles and bones. So we have a bunch of different types of white blood cells, and some of them are like little trash collectors, and some of them are like little, police officers monitoring for invaders, like military people. So the white blood cells are traveling around the body, monitoring for invaders, cleaning up cellular waste and other toxins, and there are kind of different teams for those different tasks. And if they find something threatening, like a virus, for example, they quickly spread the word and mount an attack. And then the lymph is also transporting waste from all over the body through to the bloodstream. So the whole lymphatic system is this giant watershed, and it all flows back to this spot under the collarbones, especially the left side. And at that point, the lymph gets added into the bloodstream, specifically into a vessel that is immediately bound for the liver, where that lymph gets processed and the liver filters out whatever needs to be removed from it, and then goes on, and then the liver takes over in detoxification from there. So the lymph vessels don't have a dedicated pump like the blood vessels have the heart to pump the blood. And so they have little valves, though, that prevent backflow. And then they rely on movement of the body, contraction of the muscles, primarily to push that lymphatic fluid along. So that's one of the reasons that exercise is so important for lymphatic system health. And so this system can get clogged if we don't exercise very much. It especially gets clogged when we're dehydrated, because it's a fluid that should be thin, sort of like milk, so that it can flow easily. But when we get dehydrated, it can get thickened, even to the point of like cottage cheese, which is sort of an upsetting image. So I'm sorry about that. But then it really clogs up. And because it has all of these white blood cells in it, it can cause a lot of inflammation in areas where it gets clogged, because that's one of the things white blood cells do. They create inflammation, and that can be a good thing to help us heal from an injury or fight an infection. But if it gets misdirected because there's just basically like a traffic snarl, that's not helpful at all. So movement, hydration, and then reducing exposure to chemicals, and especially all of those body care, cleaning products. And things that you might notice in particular with clogged lymph are chronic swelling in the body. There are some other conditions that can do this, like a heart condition. So if you were having especially like chronic swelling, like fluid collection in your ankles, you'd want to get that checked out and make sure it's not a heart condition or a liver condition, but it can be primarily a lymphatic condition. Breast pain can be a sign of clogged lymph system. Just body aches and pains, having a lot of aches around old injuries. Those are some of the most common ones. And then besides exercise and hydration, other things that can really help are dry skin brushing. That's another thing that we have a great YouTube video coaching you on. So feel free to check that out, as well as rebounding, which is essentially jumping on a trampoline. But there are specific like small home trampolines that you can use for this purpose. And that particularly helps to just keep the lymph kind of moving up those little valved vessels. Castor oil packs, like we talked about before. And then lymphatic massage, and especially electrolymphatic therapy, which is one of the services we offer at Tummy Temple, is really, really helpful for moving the lymph. It penetrates more deeply, unlike traditional manual lymphatic massage. It can kind of like jackhammer up and thin out and move along stuck lymph. which can be just very, very helpful for body pain, lymphatic swelling, recovering from in chronic infections, all sorts of things like that. All right, and finally, our emotions are such an important form of nervous system discharge, processing and allowing trauma to move through our bodies. And so avoiding feeling our emotions, just kind of shutting down, not confronting it, not letting it be present, can really result in a lot of stuck and stored emotions in the body. And that can cause a lot of pain, actually. One way of looking at this is that our body is, in a way, our subconscious, and we store things in our subconscious in our physical body. So we can store emotions in tension in our abdomen. Sometimes after a colonic, people will have a big emotional release because they just have this area of holding emotions in the abdomen. So it's very helpful to do our best to be present with our emotions, allow ourselves to feel them fully. And when we do that, they almost always dissipate naturally. It's just like a process. It's like a weather pattern. And it can be scary to confront those things. And of course, it's very helpful to have a counselor, get support with that process. But learning to let the emotions be what they are and pass in their own time is very transformational. Meditation can be very, very helpful. I talk to my patients about meditation all the time and recommend it. And homeopathic treatment is helpful for many things, including physical symptoms, but it can be very, very helpful on this level as well. Questions? Now, this is a lot of information. All right, getting close to the end. So with all the products and cleanse options out there, I think it's very important to choose good quality. I would never recommend just, picking up a cleanse like supplement off the shelf at like Target or QFC or, like most just supermarkets. There have been studies showing that a lot of times the herbal products are highly contaminated with things like heavy metals or are just not what they say they are. There's not much regulation, unfortunately, both in the body care, skincare, cleaning product, all of that area, and then also in the nutritional supplement world. And so the things that we choose them because they're good quality, because they're third-party tested to confirm that they contain what they say they contain and, are pure. And there are a number of good companies out there. We like the ones we use, but they're certainly not the only good ones. But a lot of grocery stores have really terrible quality stuff, and I would absolutely not trust putting it in my mouth. So pay attention to quality.
Dr. Wood, do you have an opinion on silicone collapsible water bottles?
Yes, actually. I generally think silicone's a pretty decent quality and non-leaching substance. On the other hand, the collapsible water bottles grow mold inside them like nobody's business. So I would pass on those, and they're extremely hard to clean the inside. And I know that because I bought one because I thought it was really cool and handy. And shortly after starting to use it, I found mold inside it. So I would say pass. So other kind of safety issues with cleansing would be addressing constipation first. And so, like starting with a colonic or with an enema or, using some sort of gentle or herbal or magnesium-based stool softener to just like get things moving. You can make yourself feel way worse by starting a cleanse while constipated. And then, as I mentioned before, the liver does a lot of its detoxification work at night. And so increasing rest, a lot of times when we do cleansing work, we feel more tired, sometimes a little bit achy. I would say if you feel terrible while cleansing, that's not a good sign. It means that your body is mobilizing toxins faster than it can get them out, or like stirring things up faster than it can get them out. And when that happens, they'll just resettle elsewhere. And so it's better to kind of space out the cleanse further, or reduce how much you're taking, or back off a little bit, or do whatever you can, like do a colonic or do a lymphatic therapy session, whatever you need to do to increase the rate at which, sauna is fantastic, like an infrared sauna, Epsom salt bath, whatever you can do to increase the rate at which you're able to get things out. That will take down any feelings of headaches, body aches, fatigue, things like that. So it's normal to feel more fatigued. I would say try to plan a cleanse when you have time to rest, and when you can sort of take things off your plate and slow down. It's normal to feel a little kind of malaisey, but if it gets to be more than that, it's not worth just pushing through it. It will be counterproductive. So yeah, either slowing down how much you're taking of your, cleansing products, or helping your body get things out faster are very important. And then once again, I just want to reiterate that I encourage approaching cleansing from a desire for self-care and nourishment, not trying to like beat the toxins out of yourself, or, not as like a punishment, not as like I have to do this or else I'll be dirty or contaminated, or, it's to help us thrive. It's to help us feel better. So I think that's an important mindset to be coming from.
Dr. Wood, there is a question about the impact of vaccines or boosters on the body.
That's a big question. Are we specifically talking COVID-19 vaccines and boosters? I assume so.
I would guess, because I would guess that.
So I would say that those particular vaccines don't have much in the way of adjuvants. So that's good news. They're not like a lot of vaccines have to have something toxic in them to stir up your immune system so that it will create, so it'll actually get so the immune system will get revved up enough to create an immune reaction that will result in immune memory. That mRNA vaccines work differently. And so they don't need to have that adjuvant, which like in the flu vaccine, the multi-dose flu vaccine still has thimerosal, which is mercury in it. So, sometimes those and other ones have aluminum. So those are like, unfortunately kind of toxic ingredients in order to stimulate that immune reaction. These ones are different. Honestly, other than that it might give you a fever, and of course, some people have had bad reactions to these vaccines, and there's ongoing work trying to understand what's happening there. But other than like short-term kind of body aches, fever, like normal immune reaction, that's a normal expected reaction to a vaccine, I wouldn't say it has much bearing on this particular conversation. I would say maybe don't plan your cleanse for like when you might get vaccinated, because
they gave a little more information saying that the shingles shot had caused a reaction for them.
Oh, yeah, I think that's that's outside of the purview of this conversation. And, you know, sometimes things like that can happen when we need some support with cleansing, but it's hard to say. There are a lot of things that can be going on. So I'll just leave it at that. Let's see, I had a few more things to say, but please keep the questions coming. So if you're designing a cleanse for yourself, generally, other than juice fasting or like going, like water fasting is another approach that we're really not going to get into, but you know, there are water fasting centers, you know, that can be really helpful to have that monitored. But the approach we generally take is based on a whole foods diet. And so just, you know, taking out all the processed stuff, really focusing on nourishment, getting lots of good quality fiber and fruits and vegetables and brightly colored, you know, antioxidant polyphenols from foods. And then, you know, I always recommend during a cleanse, avoid alcohol, tobacco, coffee, sugar, and processed foods. Drink lots of water, eat organic, get plenty of rest, make sure you can slow down, get plenty of good sleep. And then, you know, add in sweating. It's not really a great time to focus on intense exercise. So just for like the week or two that you do a cleanse for, you know, do some walking, do some saunas. But, and, you know, if you feel great and you have the energy and you don't feel depleted after, you can do whatever exercise, but I wouldn't say like add in intensive exercise during your cleanse. But moving your body every day, walking and stretching are fantastic. And then just, you know, the things that we find are helpful for increasing the impact of a cleanse are the complete body reset packs is kind of our go-to strategy. If you just want that phase 2 liver detoxification support, our I'm blanking on the name. Heidi, can you help me out? The Temple
Detox Optimizer 2.
Yeah.
It optimizes that phase 2 detox.
Exactly. It's kind of a mouthful, but
It's
very
true.
helpful. All right. So let's see. Yes, and then we've kind of already been through most of this, but dry skin brushing is fantastic. Castor oil packs are fantastic. So I try to encourage like dry skin brush for 5 minutes or at least 5 minutes daily during your cleanse. Do a castor oil pack. You know, maybe you could do it daily. I have had people have essentially I don't know quite what to call it, like people who have taken a lot of medication in their lifetime, sometimes with doing like daily castor oil packs, they will feel the effect as if they took a bunch of those medications. It's as if the body is stirring up this sort of stored byproducts from the medications they've taken. And so, you know, just be aware that can happen. It's a powerful therapy. It works very, very well for helping the liver to detoxify. But that can be really great. I'd say like maybe 3 to 5 times a week is a good number of treatments of castor oil packs during a cleanse, and for a minimum of 20 minutes. And again, you can check out the video online and get some more guidance on that. Epsom salt baths can be fantastic, and generally recommend adding in like 4 cups of Epsom salts to your bathtub and soaking for about 20 minutes. And that's helpful both because we can absorb the magnesium through the skin. We can kind of sweat somewhat in the bathtub. So if you don't have access to a sauna, that can be a good way to sweat. You can like drink a cup of ginger tea while you soak in the bathtub to increase sweating. And then also most Epsom salts are magnesium sulfate, and we actually absorb some of the sulfur through the skin. And so that's another way to get sulfur in which we need to make glutathione, which is our powerful antioxidant and kind of detoxifying factor in the liver. And then coffee enemas can be very, very helpful. And that's like, max daily during a cleanse, but maybe a couple times during your, week to 10-day cleanse.
So there's a question if the castor oil roll-on has the same effect as the castor oil pack.
Yeah, absolutely. So really it's but castor oil pack is just kind of the name for the treatment where you're applying the oil potentially to a cloth pack and using that to apply it to your belly. So it's just a slightly different way of getting the castor oil on the body. But I kind of just think of the cloth as helping to like keep the oil contained and covered up, and so it's not getting everywhere. Really, it's just about getting the oil on your skin, and so it doesn't make a very big difference otherwise.
This is a great question. Do hot tubs have any of the same benefits of baths or saunas? We're like, God, I hope so.
I would say yes, and if it's chlorinated, you're probably also absorbing some chlorine through your skin. So that can be a bit of a lateral move.
You're also inhaling a lot of chlorine in a hot tub, which, so
yeah, depends on the setup. Some people go way out of their way to not use chlorine, and in that case, it can be great.
I have something to add.
Mm-hmm.
There's this really amazing hot springs in Southern Washington called Carson Hot Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And they have an old style 1800s bathhouse. And so you can get, you can soak in a private tub there with the hot springs water that they get. And then they also have hot tubs that are filled with the mineral water that you can rent. There's rooms where you can have it a private mineral spring hot tub water on your balcony.
That sounds fantastic. I haven't been to that hot spring, but I've been to other ones like that, and yes, fantastic. And I wish we had more of that it's such a big thing in Europe. Bathhouses and just like building in kind of sauna and soaking therapies into lifestyle is so common in Japan, so common in Europe, and we've got some of it here. But yeah, I wish we had it like in every neighborhood.
Agreed. It's so great.
All right, so that's everything that I wanted to cover today. Happy to answer questions if anybody has further questions about.
There's one more. Mentioning that you had mentioned water pollution. Is that a major issue here? Is there any particular method of filter that you'd recommend? I do have a recommendation for that.
Go for it, Heidi.
It is an issue. It's an issue everywhere, unfortunately. But there's a really wonderful company locally. We're not affiliated with them, but they're great. And they are called Custom Pure. And they are up in Shoreline. And I will toss their website into the chat in just 1 second when I pull it off of the interweb. They are great. They will talk to you. They have really wonderful under-the-counter systems that it's expensive at first, but once you get it in, and each year it's really nothing compared to buying water.
Yes, and Berkey filters are a good option. Yes, absolutely. As Heidi said, water pollution is a problem here. And even, we add chlorine to the water in order to kill contaminants and can kill bacteria. And so that has a great public health benefit. Of course, we are better off not all having gastroenteritis all the time. And we don't want to be taking in a whole bunch of chlorine. And so water filtration is important to take the chlorine back out. A lot of cities use chloramine, which is a derivative of chlorine, and it's not removed by Brita filters. And so we have to, go for a higher quality filter to get the chloramine out. So yeah, the handout that I'm going to send out has the link to custom, or the name Custom Pure, and a few suggestions of a few good water filters that I like, a few of my favorite air filter brands, because that's also a huge deal. And a lot of times air quality is worse inside the home than outside the home because of all the dryer sheets and laundry detergent and scented candles and, you know, scented plugins and Bath and Body Works products, and that have a lot of fragrances and things added that are all chemical based and not regulated at all, and have like a million nasty chemicals in them that are toxic to the brain, disrupting to the hormone systems, and just like clog up our lymphatic systems in general. So I don't know about, I see that question about does Tum water use chloramine versus chlorine? I forget, honestly. Yeah, I think it's worth getting a Nata Brita filter for a lot of reasons, not just for that reason. They're just not fantastic filters. So, but, oh, you can look it up online. And I believe if you go to the Environmental Working Group website, they have a search function where you can search for information about the water situation in your area. So that's a good way to check.
Fabulous, thank you. And we also have another question. What is your opinion on alkaline water?
This is a tricky one because a lot of people have those alkalinizers. I don't think it makes a very big difference. I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it's like causing harm unless you're drinking a lot of it during meals, and then you're going to be diluting your stomach acid. But I don't think it has any effect on the alkaline or acidic nature of the blood, because our bodies tightly regulate that. That's exactly what our lungs and our kidneys are highly tuned to keep our blood acidity very steady, and that will not be in any way influenced by the alkalinity of the water we're taking in. So, you know, it's probably not going to hurt. I know there are a lot of claims that it like makes the water molecules smaller or larger, which like improves hydration. And I don't really know about that, honestly. I'm not sure. I haven't looked deeply into that, but I don't think it has any effect on the acidity or alkalinity of your body.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure, and thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. Made this night very special, and always wonderful working with Dr. Wood here and Heidi from Tummy Temple. And definitely tune back in for their talk on, I think it was Tuesday the 4th at 7 p.m.
Oh, yes, and we are offering a discount for anyone who was at this class. There is a coupon code Cleanse Support, and that will get you 20% off of any products on our website for the next week, and $20 off of any session you book in the next week. It's just Cleanse Support, and you can just mention you were at this class when you call in, or put Cleanse Support into the coupon code on our website.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.